The scorching summer sun of 1876 beat down relentlessly on Tabitha Keller as she rocked her feverish 6-month-old son in her arms, tears streaming down her dust-streaked face. The tiny cabin in Gold Hill, Colorado, had become an oven in the unforgiving July heat, and little Samuel's whimpers had grown weaker with each passing hour. "Please, God," Tabitha whispered, pressing her cracked lips against her baby's forehead. "Please don't take him from me too." It had been 11 months since influenza had claimed her husband during their journey west. 11 months of struggling alone, of learning to survive in this harsh frontier town where she knew almost no one. Tabitha had managed to secure work as a seamstress, but with Samuel's illness, she couldn't leave his side. The baby's skin burned against her chest, his tiny body listless. 3 days of this terrible fever, and nothing she tried seemed to help. The well water was warm, offering no relief. The damp cloth she pressed against his skin dried almost immediately in the stifling heat of the cabin. A knock at the door startled her. Clutching Samuel closer, she approached cautiously. Visitors were rare, especially in this heat. "Who's there?" She called, her voice hoarse from crying and thirst. "Yancy Forrester, madam. Doc Peterson sent me." Tabitha unlatched the door, revealing a tall man in his late 20s, his skin bronzed from the sun, dark hair pushed back under a worn Stetson. His eyes, a striking blue that reminded her of the Colorado sky in autumn, moved from her face to the baby in her arms. "The doctor said your boy's sick," Yancy said, removing his hat. "He's tending to miners injured in a collapse and can't come himself, but he thought I might be able to help." "How?" Tabitha asked, desperation edging her voice. "Samuel's been burning with fever for days. Nothing I do helps." Yancy stepped inside, his gaze assessing the stuffy cabin. "This heat's killing folks all over the territory. Your baby needs cooler air." His eyes met hers with a certainty that made her heart skip. "We'll ride till the breeze finds him, up in the foothills where the air's cooler and cleaner. Ride, I don't have a horse." Tabitha hesitated, clutching Samuel tighter, "and he's too sick to travel." "He's too sick not to," Yancy countered gently. "I've got my horse outside and a pack mule with supplies. Doc gave me some willow bark tea for the fever, but what that child needs most is to get out of this heat." Tabitha looked down at Samuel's flushed face. What choice did she have? The baby's breathing had grown more labored by the hour. "Let me gather a few things," she decided, moving quickly to collect a blanket and the few baby clothes she possessed. Within minutes, they were outside. Yancy's chestnut gelding stomped impatiently as he secured her small bundle to the pack mule. Then he turned to her, arms outstretched. "I'll hold him while you mount up," he offered. Tabitha hesitated, reluctant to hand over her precious child to this stranger. But there was something in Yancy Forrester's steady gaze that inspired trust. She carefully transferred Samuel to his arms, surprised at how naturally the large man cradled her son. Yancy murmured softly to the baby as she mounted the horse, then handed Samuel back up to her. "Hold him close," he instructed, mounting behind her. His arms formed a protective circle as he reached for the reins. "We'll ride slow and steady. It's about 4 hours to where we're headed." As they left Gold Hill behind, Tabitha was acutely aware of the strong chest at her back, the secure arms keeping her and Samuel safely on the horse. Despite the circumstances, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months' hope. "Have you done this before, Mr. Forrester?" she asked as they followed a trail leading into the foothills. "Yancy, please," he corrected. "And yes, madam, I was raised by my grandfather, an army doctor. He taught me a thing or two about tending fevers." He adjusted his hold on the reins. "During the war, we learned that sometimes the best medicine is fresh air and a change of surroundings." "The war you fought last 2 years, cavalry scout," his voice grew quieter, "saw enough to know I wanted peace after." They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic movement of the horse lulling Samuel into a fitful sleep against Tabitha's chest. "What brought you to Gold Hill, Mrs. Keller?" Yancy asked eventually. "Tabitha," she offered. "My husband James had mining fever. We left Missouri last summer with dreams of striking it rich." She swallowed hard. "He never even got to try his hand at it. Influenza took him before we reached Colorado. I was already carrying Samuel." She felt Yancy's slight nod behind her. "I'm sorry for your loss. What about you?" She asked, desperate to move away from her own painful story. "I ranch about 15 miles outside of town. Small spread, but it's growing. I come into Gold Hill for supplies every couple of weeks. Doc Peterson knows I have some healing skills, so sometimes he sends for me when he's short-handed." As they climbed higher into the foothills, the air gradually began to change. Tabitha noticed it first as a coolness against her skin, then as a freshness in her lungs. Samuel stirred in her arms, his first movement in hours. "There now," Yancy said, his breath warm against her ear. "Feel that? That's what your boy needs." By late afternoon, they reached a small clearing beside a stream. Tall pines provided shade, and a gentle breeze rustled through the branches. Samuel had awakened during the last hour of their journey, his cries weaker but his eyes more alert than they'd been in days. Yancy dismounted in one fluid motion, then reached up to help Tabitha down. His hands were strong and sure at her waist, steadying her as her legs adjusted to solid ground. "This is one of my favorite spots," he explained, leading the horse to drink from the clear stream. "Cool water, good shelter. We'll make camp here for the night." Within an hour, Yancy had set up a small camp, building a fire that would keep away the chill once the sun set. From his supplies, he produced a pot and some dried herbs. "Willow bark tea," he explained, preparing the medicine. "And I've got some broth that'll be good for both of you." Tabitha sat on a blanket he'd spread near the fire, rocking Samuel gently. The baby's skin still felt warm, but not with the frightening heat of before. His eyes tracked the movements of tree branches overhead, and he'd accepted a few drops of water from her fingertips. "He seems better already," she marveled. Yancy nodded, handing her a cup of the medicinal tea. "Let it cool some, then try to get him to take a little. It's bitter, but it'll help the fever." As darkness fell, Samuel drank a few spoonfuls of the tea and some broth, then fell into a peaceful sleep for the first time in days. Tabitha felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered to Yancy, who sat across the fire. "I was so afraid. You've been carrying too much alone," he said simply. "Sometimes the burden gets too heavy for one pair of shoulders." Under the star-filled sky, Tabitha found herself sharing the story of her journey west, of the dreams she and James had harbored, and the harsh reality she'd faced after his death. Yancy listened attentively, occasionally adding more wood to the fire. When she finally fell silent, exhausted from the emotional release, he spoke of his own life, his grandfather's healing ways, his time scouting for the Union, and his determination to build something lasting in this wild country. "War makes a man appreciate peace," he said softly. "I've seen enough death to last several lifetimes. Now I want to create something instead of destroying." As Tabitha drifted to sleep that night, Samuel cradled against her beneath a warm blanket. She felt safer than she had in almost a year. Morning brought cool mountain air, and a miracle: Samuel's fever had broken. The baby nursed hungrily for the first time in days, his eyes bright and curious as he watched Yancy prepare breakfast. "We should stay another day," Yancy suggested, offering Tabitha a tin cup of coffee. "Give him time to get stronger before we head back down." Tabitha nodded gratefully. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you for this." Yancy waved away her concern. "No debt between neighbors, Tabitha." They spent the day by the stream, where Yancy showed Tabitha which plants could be used for medicine and which were good for eating. He fashioned a small shelter from pine boughs where she could nurse Samuel in privacy, and told stories that made her laugh for the first time in months. That evening, as Samuel slept peacefully nearby, Yancy spoke of his ranch. "It's not much yet, a cabin, barn, about 40 head of cattle, but the land is good, sheltered valley with year-round water." "It sounds wonderful," Tabitha said sincerely. "It's lonely," Yancy admitted, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "A man wasn't meant to live entirely alone." Something in his voice made her heart quicken, but she looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "Gold Hill isn't much easier. Everyone's either a miner or serving the miner's needs. Not many families yet." "Is that what you want, a family life?" Tabitha stroked Samuel's downy head. "I want my son to grow up somewhere safe, with open spaces and clean air, not in the shadow of saloons and brothels." Yancy nodded thoughtfully, adding another log to the fire. Gold Hill's growing too fast. Not all that growth is good. The next morning, they packed up to return to town. Samuel was a different baby from the one they'd brought up the mountain alert, cooing, his cheeks pink with health rather than fever. "He's a fighter," Yancy observed as he helped Tabitha mount the horse. "Takes after his mother, I'd wager." The ride back to Gold Hill was filled with easy conversation. Tabitha learned that Yancy had come west after the war with nothing but his horse and his grandfather's medical kit, working cattle drives until he saved enough to stake his claim on his small ranch. "Some men find gold in the streams," he told her. "I found mine in the land itself." As they approached town, Tabitha felt a growing sadness. Their brief escape into the mountains had been more than just a healing journey for Samuel. It had reminded her what it felt like to have someone to rely on, to share burdens and joys alike. When they reached her cabin, Yancy insisted on carrying water from the well, stoking the stove, and making sure she had everything she needed before he left. Standing in the doorway, Samuel content in her arms, Tabitha struggled to find the right words. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come yesterday." Yancy shifted his weight, hat in hand. "The doctor would have found another way to help. Perhaps, but I'm glad it was you." She met his eyes. Will you come back to check on Samuel?" Something sparked in his blue eyes. "If you'll permit it, I'd like that very much." 3 days later, Yancy returned with fresh vegetables from his garden and a small wooden rattle he'd carved for Samuel. A week after that, he brought a rocking chair he'd made himself, saying every mother needed a proper place to rock her baby. Each visit revealed more of the man behind the quiet exterior: his patience, his gentle humor, his skillful hands that could calm a frightened horse or soothe a fussy baby with equal ease. By August, Tabitha found herself watching the road from town each afternoon, hoping to glimpse his familiar figure. Samuel, too, seemed to recognize the sound of Yancy's footsteps, cooing and reaching out whenever the rancher appeared. On a warm evening as summer began to wane, Yancy invited Tabitha and Samuel to visit his ranch. "I'd like you to see it," he said simply. "The valley's beautiful this time of year." The following Sunday, they made the journey. Samuel, now nearly 8 months old and fully recovered from his illness, babbled happily from his perch in front of Yancy on the horse. Tabitha rode the gentle mare Yancy had brought specifically for her. As they crested a ridge, the valley spread before them green pastures bordered by stands of pine and aspen, a clear stream winding through the center, and nestled against the far hillside, a sturdy log cabin with smoke curling from its chimney. "It's beautiful," Tabitha breathed, taking in the peaceful scene. Pride shone in Yancy's eyes. "It's taken 3 years to get this far, started with just 10 head of cattle and that one-room cabin." He pointed to the larger structure now visible, added on last winter. 2 more rooms and a proper kitchen. They spent the day exploring the property. Yancy showed Tabitha the garden where he grew vegetables and herbs, the spring house where he kept milk and butter cool, and the barn where a new calf wobbled on spindly legs beside its mother. Late in the afternoon, as they sat on the cabin's porch watching the sun begin its descent toward the mountains, Samuel fell asleep in Yancy's arms. The rancher looked down at the baby, then at Tabitha. "I've been thinking," he said carefully. "Winter's coming in a few months. That cabin of yours in town isn't well insulated. Last winter was brutal." Tabitha nodded, remembering stories she'd heard of the previous winter's hardships. "I've been worried about that myself." Yancy took a deep breath. "I know this might seem sudden, but I've grown very fond of you and Samuel." "More than fond." His eyes held her steadily. "I'm asking if you might consider staying here, Tabitha, not just for the winter, but permanently." Her heart stuttered in her chest. "Yancy, are you proposing marriage?" "I am." His voice was quiet but certain. "I know you're still healing from losing James, and I don't expect you to love me right away, but I believe we could build a good life together. I care deeply for you both." Tabitha looked out over the peaceful valley, then back at the man holding her son with such natural tenderness. The feelings that had been growing in her heart these past weeks couldn't be denied. "I think I'm already halfway to loving you," she admitted softly. The way you saved Samuel, how you've cared for us both. You've shown me what kind of man you are, Yancy Forrester." Hope brightened his eyes. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," she confirmed, her own eyes filling with happy tears. "Samuel and I would be honored to make a home with you." They were married 2 weeks later in Gold Hill's small church with Dr. Peterson and a few townspeople as witnesses. Samuel, dressed in his best gown, charmed everyone with his toothy smiles. That evening, arriving at the ranch as Tabitha Forrester, she felt both the weight of the past and the promise of the future. Yancy carried her over the threshold in the traditional manner, Samuel giggling in her arms. "Welcome home," he whispered, setting her gently on her feet. Their first weeks as a family passed in a blur of happy adjustments. Tabitha added her feminine touches to the cabin curtains she sewed from fabric Yancy brought from town, wildflowers in jars on the table, her own quilts spread across their bed. Yancy built a cradle for Samuel that could be rocked with a foot while hands remained free for other tasks. Each night after Samuel was asleep, they would sit together on the porch, talking of the day's events and their hopes for the future. Yancy spoke of expanding the herd, of the orchard he wanted to plant in the spring. Tabitha shared her dream of perhaps opening a small school someday when more families settled in the valley. Their first kiss had been hesitant, sweet Yancy careful not to rush her, Tabitha shy but eager to explore these new feelings. By their wedding night, that hesitancy had blossomed into a tender passion that surprised them both with its intensity. "I never expected to find this again," Tabitha confessed one evening in early October as they watched the aspens turning golden on the hillsides. "After James died, I thought that part of my life was over." Yancy's arm tightened around her shoulders. "I never expected to find it at all. Most cowboys don't get this lucky." As winter approached, Yancy worked tirelessly to prepare the ranch, chopping and stacking firewood, smoking meat, filling the root cellar with vegetables from their garden. Tabitha canned preserves, dried herbs, and sewed warmer clothing for all of them. The first snow came in November, transforming the valley into a wonderland of white. Samuel, now almost a year old and taking his first tentative steps, pressed his hands against the window glass in wonder at the falling flakes. "Papa," he called, a new word he'd mastered just days before. "Papa, look!" The joy on Yancy's face at being called Papa for the first time had brought tears to Tabitha's eyes. He'd scooped Samuel up and taken him outside to feel the snow on his little palms, both of them laughing as the flakes melted instantly. That winter proved to be as harsh as predicted. Heavy snows isolated the ranch for weeks at a time, but inside their cabin, Tabitha found a warmth that went beyond the crackling fire in the hearth. They established family rituals, reading aloud in the evenings, Sunday dinners with special treats, music from Yancy's harmonica that made Samuel dance in his wobbly, 1-year-old way. In January, during a rare clear spell between storms, Yancy rode to Gold Hill for supplies and returned with startling news. "Gold's played out," he reported. "The main vein they've been following went dry last week. Half the miners have already left town, heading to the next strike." "What will happen to Gold Hill?" Tabitha asked, shocked at how quickly fortunes could change. "Some folks will stay on, try to make a go of it as a proper town instead of a mining camp. Others will chase the next boom." Yancy hung his coat by the door. "Doc Peterson's staying. Says he's too old to start over again." As winter gradually released its grip on the land, they began planning for spring. Yancy wanted to add another room to the cabin and build a proper chicken coop. Tabitha dreamed of expanding her garden and perhaps getting sheep for wool. What neither of them planned was the discovery Tabitha made as March winds began to thaw the frozen landscape. The familiar symptoms couldn't be mistaken: the morning sickness, the tenderness, the subtle changes in her body. "Yancy," she said one evening after Samuel was asleep, "I have something to tell you." The look on his face when she shared her news was one she would treasure forever: wonder and joy and a touch of fear, all mingled together. "A baby," he whispered, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Due in October, I think." She covered his hand with her own. "Samuel will be a big brother." Yancy pulled her into his arms, his voice rough with emotion. "I never thought I'd have this, Tabitha, a family of my own." "Nor did I," she admitted. "Not after losing James, but life had other plans for us both." Spring brought new life to the valley calves in the pasture, shoots pushing through the garden soil, wildflowers carpeting the hillsides. Samuel grew more adventurous daily, exploring the world on increasingly steady legs, his vocabulary expanding almost as quickly as his curiosity. In May, 3 families arrived in the valley, drawn by Yancy's descriptions of the fertile land and year-round water. They staked claims on neighboring parcels, bringing the community Tabitha had longed for. "Maybe that school will happen sooner than we thought," Yancy observed as they watched the newcomers' wagons approach. Summer passed in a whirl of activity. The new families helped raise barns and cabins, shared seeds and livestock, established the beginnings of a community. Tabitha's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her body swelling with new life as Samuel celebrated his 2nd birthday. On a warm September evening, almost exactly 14 months after they'd first met, Tabitha and Yancy sat on their porch watching the sunset. Samuel played nearby with the puppy Yancy had brought home for him, his delighted giggles filling the air. "Remember that day when I first came to your cabin?" Yancy asked, his hand resting on her rounded belly where their 2nd child grew. "Samuel was so sick and you looked ready to collapse yourself." Tabitha nodded, covering his hand with hers. "I was terrified. I thought I was going to lose him too." "We'll ride till the breeze finds him," Yancy quoted his own words from that desperate day. "I had no idea then that the ride would lead us here. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Dr. Peterson had gone himself instead of sending you?" Yancy considered this. "I believe some things are meant to be, Tabitha. If not that day, perhaps another." He smiled at her. "Though I'm mighty glad it was that day. Watching you care for Samuel despite your own exhaustion, seeing your strength and grace under such terrible pressure, I think I started falling in love with you right then." The baby kicked beneath their joined hands, a strong, healthy movement that made them both smile. "And I fell in love with you in the mountains," Tabitha confessed. "The way you knew exactly what Samuel needed, how gentle you were with both of us. You never made me feel helpless or foolish, just supported." "That's what partners do," Yancy said simply. "Support each other through whatever comes." In early October, as the aspens turned golden once again, their daughter was born, Emma Rose Forrester, with her father's blue eyes and a dusting of her mother's red-gold hair. Samuel approached his baby sister with solemn curiosity, gently patting her tiny hand under Yancy's watchful guidance. "Family," the toddler pronounced carefully, a word Yancy had been teaching him in preparation for this moment. "That's right, son," Yancy confirmed, gathering all 3 of them in his embrace. "This is our family." That night, with Emma sleeping in her cradle and Samuel in his little bed in the room they'd added that spring, Tabitha and Yancy stood at the window watching the stars appear over their valley. "I think about that terrible heat sometimes," Tabitha mused. "How something so frightening led to something so beautiful." "That's the pattern of life out here," Yancy replied, drawing her close. "Hardship and beauty, danger and reward, all woven together." She turned in his arms, raising her face to his. "Thank you for finding the breeze that day, for saving Samuel, for giving us both a home and a future." Yancy kissed her tenderly, the love between them as tangible as the solid walls of the home they'd built together. "No, Tabitha. Thank you for being brave enough to trust a stranger with your precious child, for giving me the family I never thought I'd have." Outside, a gentle autumn breeze rustled through the golden aspens, carrying the promise of the changing seasons. Inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Tabitha and Yancy Forrester had found something even more precious, a love born of compassion, strengthened by shared purpose, and destined to weather whatever storms the frontier might bring.